The first buzz of my phone barely registered in my sleep, a faint vibration against the wooden nightstand. My eyes stayed closed, and I shifted slightly, trying to ignore the small disruption. The second buzz was a little more insistent, pulling me further from my dreams, the tendrils of consciousness beginning to worm their way in. But it was a third, short, sharp, and unmistakable, that dragged me into full awareness. My body was stiff with the suddenness of it, and a groan slipped from my lips as I reached blindly for the phone. My fingers brushed against something smooth and cold instead, not the familiar, warm curve of my own device. It was Carol's phone. That struck me as strange. Carol never left her phone unattended, not even when she went to the bathroom. She developed this attachment to it long before I'd even met her. She used to laugh about it, call it a weird habit, proof of her connection to social media or the endless web of gossip she liked to follow. At first, it had been endearing, proof that she was never far from her world, her friends, her connections. But now, with my own phone still buzzing beside me, an uncomfortable feeling bloomed in my chest. I unlocked the screen. 3 messages from an unknown number. The text on the first one made my stomach flip. Check her phone. She's lying to you. She's not alone right now. My mind went blank. Struggling to catch up, I glanced over at Carol's side of the bed. Empty. The sheets were still faintly warm, but the space beside me was cold, disturbingly empty. My heart started to beat faster, and that feeling in my gut turned from unease to something darker, deeper, more instinctive. I sat up slowly, eyes darting to the bedroom door, and then to the hallway outside, my ears straining in the silence. The house was still, but it wasn't peaceful. It was too quiet, too expectant, like it was holding its breath. Then the faintest sound broke the silence. Not the usual creaks of the house settling, not the low hum of the fridge downstairs. This was something softer, something unmistakable. A voice, low and hushed, followed by a giggle. Carol's giggle. Every muscle in my body went taut. My heart slammed in my chest. My mind was clouded with panic and rage. And yet I couldn't move. I stayed frozen, my grip tightening on the phone. Instinct screamed at me, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay still. With slow, deliberate movements, I slid out of bed, my phone still clutched in my hand. The carpet underfoot was soft, too soft, and my steps were quiet, almost careful, as if I could somehow avoid the truth, avoid what was happening. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I had to keep moving, had to see for myself. When I reached the stairs, I stopped. My breath hitched as I glanced toward the living room below. The light was off, but the faint glow from a phone screen bathed the room in shadows. 2 figures sat close together on the couch. Carol and a man. Too close. My vision tunneled, and the world around me blurred. I felt a strange warping of reality, my mind struggling to make sense of the scene, but it wouldn't. My eyes stayed locked on Carol as she leaned in toward him, her face inches from his. Their hands were nearly touching, the intimacy of the moment unmistakable. Rage exploded inside me. It burned through my veins like wildfire. My fists clenched at my sides, my breath shallow, but I stayed quiet. If they heard me now, if they turned to look, no, I wasn't ready to confront them yet. I tightened my grip on the railing as I stood there, barely breathing, trying to force myself to think. I had to stay calm. But then, the front door creaked open. A sharp gasp, a quick intake of breath. My heart skipped a beat as my eyes snapped to the doorway. There she was, Emily, our daughter, frozen in the doorway. Her wide eyes flicked between me, Carol, and the man on the couch. She didn't understand it fully, but she knew. Her small face twisted in confusion, then fear. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice so small, so innocent. Carol's gaze snapped to Emily, and in that instant, I saw it. The moment Carol realized just how bad this was, her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The realization was hitting her now, the full weight of what she'd done, of what she'd been caught doing. Kenneth, the man on the couch, moved first. He bolted upright, shoving his phone into his pocket, and practically sprinted for the door. A mumbled apology or excuse escaped his lips, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking at him. My gaze was locked on Carol. I stepped forward. Explain. My voice was low, dangerous in its quiet. Carol's mouth worked again, but no sound came out. She was scrambling for something. Anything that could make this moment something other than the ugly truth it was. But she couldn't. She knew. There was no going back from this. Not with Emily here, watching, knowing something was wrong. It's not, Carol began, but I cut her off. Don't, I said, my voice steady, though fury burned in every syllable. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides. I was shaking with rage, but I held it in check. Emily took a step back, her little hands trembling as she looked between us. I could see the fear in her eyes, the way her small body wanted to retreat, but couldn't. She was just a child. This wasn't her fault. That broke me. Seeing her standing there, so small, so helpless in the middle of all this. She wasn't supposed to be part of this. Not like this. Not in a house that had been, until now, her safe place. Carol's eyes flickered toward Emily, and I saw her expression shift for a second. Maybe she thought she could somehow make it right, or comfort Emily. But it was too late. Emily had seen everything. Carol turned back to me, panic flashing in her eyes. And then, predictably, so, Carol, she went on the attack. You're overreacting, she snapped, crossing her arms over her chest, her tone defensive, like she was the one who had been wronged, like none of this was her fault. But I wasn't listening to her. I couldn't. Not anymore. My focus was on Emily. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, really? Then what was it, Carol? A Bible study? A business meeting? She scowled and snapped. Lower your voice. Emily doesn't need to see you act like this. She made it sound like I was the one causing trouble. I looked at Emily then, really looked at her, her small hands gripping the strap of her backpack, the way her lip quivered, her mother's eyes filling with tears. Carol had already taken so much from me, but this was the one thing I wasn't going to let her take. I exhaled sharply, trying to steady my voice. Emily, sweetheart, go upstairs, okay? I'll talk to you in a minute. She hesitated, glancing at her mother. Carol forced a smile, as if she could smooth things over, as if nothing was wrong. Go on, darling, she cooed. Daddy's just upset. The fury rose in my throat, but I bit it back. Emily nodded, hesitated a moment longer, then turned and ran up the stairs. As soon as I heard her door click shut, I turned back to Carol. Now, I said, my voice cold as ice, tell me the truth, or you'll regret every second of this. Carol didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate either. Instead, she smirked. Then, with a lazy drawl, she said the words that would end it all. Well, since you're so curious, she said, I was actually thinking about asking for an open marriage. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to backpedal, to turn it into some sick joke. But she just stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted, looking at me like I was the crazy one. An open marriage? I repeated, testing the words in my mouth. They didn't belong there. She rolled her eyes. Don't act so shocked. I stepped closer, my voice dropping low, almost dangerous. You were sneaking around with another man in our home. Our daughter walked in on it. And instead of apologizing, you're suggesting an open marriage. Carol sighed as if this were nothing more than an inconvenience. Jesus, calm down. You're blowing this out of proportion. Something inside me snapped. You think this isn't a big deal? My voice shook with the weight of my fury. You think Emily walking in on you with some guy isn't a big deal? You think breaking our vows, lying to my face, disrespecting our family? None of that matters. She threw her hands up as if I were being overly dramatic. God, you're so dramatic. I was going to talk to you about it eventually, but you're just so uptight. I knew you'd react like this. My pulse raced, my mind whirling. My wife, the woman I'd loved, stood in front of me, caught red-handed, and somehow she was making me out to be the unreasonable one. How long? I forced the words out through clenched teeth. How long have you been seeing him? Carol hesitated, just for a moment, but that hesitation told me everything. A broken laugh escaped me. So that's a yes, then? You've been screwing around. How long, Carol? She shrugged, nonchalant, as if this was no big deal. "A few months," she said, dismissing it like it was nothing. I stood there, frozen. A few months? Every late night, every girl's night, every errand that didn't add up, it all falls into place now. I let out a breathless laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. "You're unbelievable." She shrugged again. "It's not a big deal," she said, like she was offering me a gift. "It's just variety. I love you, but I don't want to be stuck in the same routine forever. I thought maybe if we opened things up, it would help us." I ran a hand through my hair, struggling to hold my composure. "And let me guess," I said bitterly, "you already talked this through with Kenneth." Her silence was confirmation enough. Of course. I let out a humorless laugh, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "So you've had your fun, made your choice, and now you expect me to just go along with it?" She smirked, that infuriating smirk, the one that said she thought she had already won. "You should think about it," she said casually. "It could be good for us." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I wanted to scream, to destroy something, to make her feel even a fraction of what I felt. But then a dark thought formed in my mind, perfect, deliberate, and cold. Carol wanted an open marriage? Fine, let's give her one. I stared at her, already knowing where to start. She leaned back, arms crossed, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to explode, to break down, to leave. She thought she had me trapped. She was wrong. I had hoped for a moment of vulnerability, a chance to beg or plead, but I soon realized Carol didn't know me as well as she thought. I took a slow, deliberate breath, locked my eyes with hers, and allowed a smile to creep across my face. I could see the slight shift in her posture, the way her confidence wavered just enough for me to know she wasn't as certain as she had been a moment ago. "You know what?" I said, my voice calm, measured, the kind of tone that made her lean in, her brow furrowing with curiosity. She looked at me, clearly expecting me to break, to apologize, to beg for things to stay the same. "What?" she asked, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I nodded slowly, letting the words sink in, stretching the tension in the air. "You're absolutely right. We should open the marriage." A flicker of hesitation passed over her face, but she masked it quickly, brushing her hair back and trying to regain her composure. "Wait, what?" she asked, not quite sure how to react. She had clearly been ready for a fight, for an argument, but now, as I stood there calmly agreeing, her smugness faltered. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, struggling to comprehend my words. "Yeah," I said again, this time with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "You're absolutely right. An open marriage, just like you suggested." Carol blinked, her posture stiffening. "I knew you'd come around," she said, trying to sound smug, but it was clear she was still processing the shock. I fought the urge to laugh. "Oh, Carol." She thought she had won. She thought she was in control. She had no idea what was coming next. She had no idea that the moment she suggested it, I had already set my plan in motion. The next morning, after Carol left for work, I wasted no time. I grabbed my phone, the weight of the decision finally settling in. I scrolled through my contacts, quickly finding the name I was looking for. Sharon, Kenneth's wife. We had met only a few times at company events, and she was quiet, polite. Nothing like the kind of woman you'd expect to get tangled up in a situation like this. But here we were. I tapped the number and waited as the phone rang. When she answered on the second ring, her voice was cautious, but polite. "Hello." "Hey, Sharon," I said, keeping my tone even. "It's Stephen, Carol's husband." A pause. "Oh, hi," she replied, her voice shifting, a hint of suspicion creeping in. I didn't waste any time. "I need to talk to you about Kenneth and Carol," I said flatly. Silence. I could hear her inhale sharply, the weight of the words hanging in the air. Then came a shaky breath. "What did they do?" I took a moment, making sure to steady my voice. I wasn't going to give her anything until I knew she was ready to hear the truth. But it was clear by then that she already knew something wasn't right. She just hadn't wanted to face it. "Meet me at a cafe," I said. "We'll talk in person." 10 minutes later, Sharon and I sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, the kind of place you could easily get lost in, where no one paid attention to the hushed tones of two people bound by betrayal. I laid everything out: Carol's late nights, the secretive texts, the way she had smirked when she admitted to it. I didn't sugarcoat anything. Sharon sat there, quiet, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped her coffee cup. I could see the emotion shift across her face. Shock, disbelief, then, finally, resignation. Her eyes were glassy, her lips trembling slightly. When I finished speaking, she exhaled a slow, shaky breath. "I knew something was off," she whispered. "Kenneth's been distant." I didn't want to believe it. But now it makes sense. I nodded, my stomach a twisted knot. "Yeah, same here. Carol's been different. It's like we've both been living in some twisted game, and neither of us has been winning." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, calculating now. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with an edge of something I couldn't quite place. I leaned back in my chair, the plan already falling into place in my mind. "Carol thinks she's in control," I said, my tone low. "She thinks she's the one calling the shots. But she made a mistake." Sharon raised an eyebrow. "What mistake?" I smiled, a cold, knowing smile. She underestimated me. Sharon's lips curled into a small smirk, and for the first time in what felt like days, I felt a flicker of something like hope. Then let's make them regret it. That night, Carol came home late, completely unaware that the floor beneath her feet had already begun to crumble. She tossed her purse onto the counter, stretched like she had just returned from some long, tiring day, and turned to me with that infuriating, self-satisfied smirk on her face. "You've been thinking about it, haven't you?" she purred, stepping closer. "About us. About how good this could be for us." I fought the urge to laugh in her face. Instead, I smiled, playing my part perfectly. "Yeah," I said, voice smooth. "I've been thinking about it a lot." Carol's grin widened, like she had already won, already cracked me open. She had no idea what was coming next. I let her talk that night. I let her spin her ridiculous justifications about freedom, excitement, how this is what we both need. I nodded along, pretending to listen, pretending to agree. I played my role perfectly. I let her believe she was wearing me down. The next night, everything was set. I invited Sharon over. Carol, sitting in the living room, scrolled through her phone, probably texting Kenneth, unaware that the stage was being set. She barely looked up when I answered the door, but when she saw Sharon standing there, her whole demeanor shifted. She froze, her eyes wide with confusion. Sharon stepped inside with effortless grace, the picture of poise and composure. She was a perfect image of calm, unbothered, as if she weren't standing face to face with the woman who had been sleeping with her husband. Carol blinked, her brow furrowing. What's she doing here?" I closed the door behind Sharon, a smirk tugging at my lips. "You wanted an open marriage," I said casually, leaning against the wall. "So I figured, why not start with Kenneth's wife?" Carol's entire body went rigid. Sharon barely concealed a smirk of her own, as if she were watching an old friend finally get what was coming to them. Carol's eyes flicked back and forth between Sharon and me, her mouth opening and closing, words failing her as her brain tried to catch up. "Wait, you what?" I raised an eyebrow. "You get to sleep with Kenneth," I said smoothly. "But I can't spend time with his wife." Her face turned a furious red, her jaw clenching tightly. It's not the same thing," she snapped, her voice rising. Sharon finally spoke, her voice low and smooth, dripping with honeyed sarcasm. "Why not?" she asked, tilting her head. "I mean, since we're all so open now." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Carol's eyes darted between us, her nostrils flaring, her hands trembling. She looked like she was ready to explode, but instead, she let out a bitter, sharp laugh. It wasn't normal. There was no humor in it, just a hollow edge. "You think this bothers me?" she scoffed, folding her arms across her chest. "Go ahead, be my guest. If you think you can handle an open marriage, then you're both more than welcome to try." Carol thought she had it all figured out. She thought she was untouchable, the mastermind behind every move. the one who always came out on top. But this time, she was wrong. Dead wrong. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. She stood there, arms crossed, pacing the living room like a caged animal. Her face was a mask of frustration, but her white-knuckle grip on her phone betrayed her. She was waiting for Kenneth to respond, probably hoping he'd come up with some excuse, some way to salvage the mess she created. But Kenneth wasn't going to save her. I'd made sure of that. Sharon and I sat calmly on the couch, a stark contrast to Carol's restless energy. Sharon's hand rested lightly on my knee, her presence steady and unshakable. She was a picture of composure, while Carol was unraveling by the second. Finally, Carol stopped in front of us, forcing a smirk. "So what's the plan here, Stephen?" she asked, her voice dripping with mockery. "You and Sharon go to play house while I do my own thing? Is that what this is?" I shrugged, leaning back casually. "You wanted an open marriage. I'm just making sure it's fair." Carol scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You don't actually want this. You're just trying to prove a point." Sharon tilted her head, her voice smooth and deliberate. "And how would you know what he wants?" Carol's jaw tightened. She didn't like that. Not one bit. Good. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "See, Carol, here's the difference between us," I said, my tone calm but cutting. "You wanted an open marriage because you thought it meant having your cake and eating it too. A husband at home and Kenneth on the side. But me? I'm actually embracing the lifestyle you suggested." Carol's smirk faltered, her expression darkening. "Stephen, you're pathetic," she spat. "You think bringing her into this will make me jealous? That I'll come crawling back, begging you to forget everything? You're a joke." I smiled, unfazed. "That's funny, because the only one losing here is you." Her eyes flickered with hesitation, and I knew I had her. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward her. Her face went pale as she saw the evidence. Her own text messages, screenshots of late-night conversations with Kenneth, her insults, her lies, her betrayal. And then there was a message I'd sent to Kenneth before she could spin her story. "Hey, Kenneth, just a heads up. Carol told me everything. Good luck explaining this to Sharon." Carol lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, slipping it into my pocket before she could grab it. You piece of—" she stammered, her voice shaking with rage. I cut her off with a smirk. "This is what honesty looks like, Carol. You should try it sometime." She turned to Sharon, desperation creeping into her voice. "You believe this? You're really going to trust him?" Sharon rose to her feet, her demeanor cool and unshakable. "I don't need to trust him," she said calmly. "I trust the evidence." Carol's panic was palpable. She was spiraling, her mind racing for an escape, but there was none. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in control. She wasn't the smartest person in the room. She wasn't winning. I let the silence hang, letting her feel the weight of her own mistakes. Then, like clockwork, she tried to flip the script. "You're just desperate to hurt me," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You don't love Sharon. You don't want an open marriage. You're just trying to get revenge." I raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "I don't love Sharon. I barely know her." I paused, letting the words sink in before delivering the final blow. "But that didn't stop you with Kenneth, did it?" Her face twitched, and I could see the cracks forming. She wasn't going to twist this narrative. Not this time. And revenge. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You bet your ass it is." Carol stood frozen, her world crumbling around her. She had wanted an open marriage, but now she was about to have an open life, one where she had nothing left to hide and nothing left to lose. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Carol stood there, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes darting between me and Sharon. She was trying to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks forming. The mention of Emily had struck a nerve. Good. She deserved to feel the weight of what she'd done. Not just betrayal, but the humiliation, the mockery, and the sheer disregard for our daughter's innocence. She let Emily walk in on her infidelity like it was nothing, like it was normal, like it didn't matter. Carol's voice broke the silence, sharp and defensive. So what? You want a divorce now? Is that it? I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Carol, Carol, Carol. I said, my voice low and deliberate. You still don't get it, do you? I turned to Sharon, who stood calmly by the window, her phone in hand. Did Kenneth respond yet? Sharon glanced at her phone, her expression as composed as ever. A small, satisfied smile curled at the corners of her lips. Oh, he responded all right. Carol's shoulders tensed, her arms tightening around herself. I motioned for Sharon to read it aloud. She cleared her throat, then spoke in a perfect imitation of Kenneth's voice, dripping with disdain. Carol, what the hell did you do? Sharon knows. She's taking the kids to her mother's. She says she wants a divorce. Thanks for ruining my life. Carol flinched as if she'd been slapped. I had to fight back a smile. Sharon turned to her, her tone icy. Looks like you're losing both men tonight. For the first time, real fear flickered across Carol's face. This wasn't just about losing control over me. She had lost Kenneth, too. This wasn't just a bad night. This was a catastrophe. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a murmur. You wanted an open marriage, Carol. Congratulations. Now you're open to deal with the fallout. Carol's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You think this is funny? She spat, her voice trembling with anger. I tilted my head, my gaze steady. No, Carol. I said, letting the weight of my next word sink in. I think it's justice. Her breathing turned ragged, her chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could speak, the front door burst open with a crash. We all turned, startled, standing in the doorway. His face thunderous and his entire body radiating rage was Kenneth. The night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Kenneth stormed into the house like a man on the edge. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes burned with fury that made the room feel even smaller. He looked like he'd just been through hell, and maybe he had. Carol spun around, her face lighting up for a split second, as if she thought he'd come to save her. But the moment she saw the way he was looking at her, that flicker of hope died. His expression wasn't one of love or desire. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. You idiot, Kenneth spat, his voice low and shaking with barely contained rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? Carol flinched, taking a step back. Kenneth, Sharon took the kids, he interrupted, his words sharp and cutting. She took everything. She called my boss, Carol. My boss. She told him everything. He took a step closer, his eyes blazing. Do you even know what that means? Carol's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air, her usual confidence shattered. I glanced at Sharon, who stood calmly by the window, her arms crossed. She gave me the tiniest nod, her expression unreadable. That was her doing. She hadn't just left Kenneth. She'd burned his world to the ground on her way out. Beautiful. Kenneth ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Jesus Christ, he muttered, his voice cracking. I lost my wife. I lost my family. And for what? A woman who can't even keep her life straight. Carol's eyes widened in panic. Wait, what are you? Kenneth turned to me, his gaze sharp and accusing. You know she was seeing someone else, right? The air in the room shifted, growing heavier, more suffocating. Carol froze, her face pale. And just like that, the night took another sharp, violent turn. I blinked, my mind struggling to process his words. Come again. Kenneth let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Oh, you know? Well, that's rich. All this time, I thought she was only screwing me behind your back. He scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. Turns out, she was playing both of us. Sharon let out a sharp, amused breath. Well, well, she said, her tone laced with irony. The plot thickens. I turned to Carol, my voice slow and deliberate. That true, Carol? Her breathing turned shallow, her chest rising and falling rapidly. I don't know what he's talking about. Kenneth barked a laugh, the sound harsh and humorless. Holy crap, don't even try it. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it to me. See for yourself. My stomach dropped as I stared at the photo on his screen. It was Carol, sitting in a dimly lit restaurant, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a candle. Across from her was a man, not Kenneth, not me, but someone else entirely. He was older, distinguished, with a confident smirk on his face. My hands clenched at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. "Who the hell is that?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. Kenneth's voice was pure ice. "That's her boss." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Carol's face was ashen, her eyes wide with panic. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Sharon stepped forward, her voice calm but cutting. "Seems like Carol's been playing more than just the two of you. How many lives are you willing to ruin, Carol?" Carol's hands trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself, her usual bravado completely shattered. She looked small, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. But I felt no sympathy. Not after everything she'd done. Kenneth ran a hand through his hair, his voice breaking. "I can't believe this. I lost everything because of you. My wife, my kids, my job, all because you couldn't keep your lies straight." I turned to Carol, my voice cold and steady. "You wanted an open marriage, Carol. But it seems you were the only one who didn't understand the rules." The room fell silent again, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on all of us. Carol stood there, her shoulders slumped, her face a mask of guilt and fear. The woman who had once been so confident, so in control, was now a shell of her former self. And as I looked at her, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And it was far from over. I whistled, a sound of disbelief. "Wow. Ambitious, huh, Carol?" Carol's hands shook, her composure faltering. She was fully exposed now. No more lies to shield her. "Listen, Stephen." "Shut up." I cut her off, my voice calm and cold, stepping toward her slowly. "So let me get this straight. You weren't just sleeping with Kenneth. You were also having an affair with your boss?" Carol's throat tightened, but Kenneth didn't let her answer. He pointed at me, his voice cutting through the air. "We're sitting here," feeling sorry for her, thinking this was all about me. Carol's face twisted in panic, her desperation clear. "Stephen, please, don't." I stepped closer, voice low and controlled. "You don't get to plead anymore, Carol." She looked at me and Kenneth, realizing the gravity of the situation. Trapped. No escape. No more illusions. And I was about to ensure she lost everything. Her body shook as her eyes darted between me and Kenneth, a trapped animal with nowhere to run. She had painted herself into this corner, and now I was going to make sure she felt every consequence. Turning to Kenneth, I asked in a measured tone, "So you've been sneaking around with her for months?" He exhaled sharply and nodded. "Yeah, and while she was with you, she was also with her boss." A bitter laugh escaped Kenneth. Carol snapped, her panic finally breaking through. "You both are being ridiculous." Her voice cracked. "It wasn't that big of a deal." I glared at her. "How long, Carol?" She hesitated. I took another step closer, my patience thinning. "How long?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Kenneth's jaw tightened. "Tell him, Carol." She gasped, breath shallow, before whispering, "A year." "A year. Not months. Not weeks. A whole year." My chest tightened, but the rage that rose wasn't hot or wild. No, this was different. It was cold, precise, and dangerous. Sharon, beside me, let out a quiet chuckle. "Well, look at that. Thought you could get away with all this, huh?" Carol's breath hitched as she tried to explain. "I never meant for it to." "To what?" I interrupted. "Blow up in your face?" "To finally face the consequences." Her jaw clenched. "I was going to tell you," she muttered, but I laughed. Harsh, bitter, and empty. "Oh, were you?" Her eyes flickered to Kenneth. "Pleading now. Tell them. It wasn't just me. You wanted this too." Kenneth scoffed, shaking his head. "Now you want to drag me down with you?" He looked at me with a resigned expression. "I've lost everything tonight. My wife, my kids, my career. But you? You still think you can talk your way out of this? Carol's panic intensified. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I thought you'd understand. I stared at her in disbelief. Understand what, Carol? That you can just cheat on me? You destroyed everything we had, trashed our marriage, and disrespected me? You threw away years of what we built for cheap thrills. Her face twisted in frustration. I deserve more than what you gave me. A thick silence hung in the air. Sharon gave a low whistle. There it is. Carol's hand flew to her mouth as she realized what she'd just admitted. I looked at her with cold eyes. Well, Carol, I said evenly, I hope all those other men were worth it, because now you've lost everything. Her face drained of color. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and, without hesitation, messaged my lawyer, filed the papers. Her breath caught in her throat. Stephen, no, please wait. I ignored her completely. Turning to Sharon, I asked, shall we? Sharon smiled. Gladly. Kenneth stood up with a bitter laugh. I'm out of here. You too have fun watching her fall apart. Carol lunged toward me, her nails digging into my arm. Stephen, please, we can fix this. I yanked my arm away hard. There's nothing left to fix, Carol. With that, I walked out the door, Sharon following right behind me. Carol was left standing there, in the wreckage of her own making. Her voice cracked behind me, full of desperation. Stephen, don't do this. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I just walked to my car, Sharon by my side, leaving Carol alone in the doorway of our home, watching as everything she'd built came crumbling down. Kenneth was already peeling out of the driveway, his tires screeching on the pavement as he fled, probably off to drown his regrets in alcohol. He'd lost everything, too, all because of her. And now, Carol was alone. Sharon stopped beside my car, exhaling sharply. Well, she said, shaking her head, that was satisfying. I chuckled, breathless. You think she'll ever come back from this? Sharon smirked. Not a chance. I took one last look at the house, at Carol still frozen in the doorway, clutching herself like she could protect herself from the fallout of her own choices. For a brief moment, I thought back to the good times, the 11 years together, the laughter, the mornings when she held me tight and whispered how she never wanted to let go. But that woman was gone. Maybe she never existed in the first place. I opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. Carol, finally taking a shaky step forward, called out again, Stephen. I rolled down the window, locking eyes with her for the last time. You wanted an open marriage? I said, my voice calm and final. Now you have nothing. And with that, I drove away. Carol didn't follow. She didn't scream. She just stood there, alone, as the weight of her own destruction crashed down around her. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom.